Hello everybody, I hope you're all doing well. If you've clicked on this video, it means that you want to learn about thin layer chromatography. This is the lab that we did in class on Tuesday. If you were not here, or if you just want a fresh recap, this is what this video is for, and we're going to be going through this activity together right now. So for ink chromatography, what is happening is you are going to be taking a very porous piece of paper, okay, putting samples of ink on it. Okay, so maybe, I don't know, I have a marker, I'm gonna put a sample here, put another sample from a different marker, I don't know, say, maybe it's a black marker there. And you're going to put a solvent of some type in a chamber. So this is all going to go into some type of container. Okay. Now, when you do this, naturally the water or the solvent, we're going to be using ethyl alcohol, will get soaked up the paper. Okay. As it travels, it's also going to carry some of that pigment that is in our ink blot down on the bottom side of the paper. Okay. But an interesting thing happens. The heavier and larger particles are going to stay at the bottom, whereas the lighter and smaller particles will travel to the top. Okay. This allows us to separate out the pigments that make markers and allows us to figure out what type of marker was used to write maybe a ransom note that's left at the scene of a crime. It's interesting that every single marker company has their own recipe for ink, so you can usually narrow it down to at least a specific brand, if not a specific year that they made that marker with that ink recipe. Okay, so I have a ransom note here, okay, and all I've done is cut out the last word in my ransom note, and I have started to cut it up. I'm trying to take out the white pieces of paper and just leave the black ink samples. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this out so that I'm going to be left with some samples to extract the ink from. Okay, so now that I have some ink samples, I am going to go ahead and put them in a small beaker and put some ethyl alcohol on them. All right, so now that I have my samples in my beaker, I'm going to add about 1 pipette's worth of ethyl alcohol. And what you'll notice is when I swish this around, it actually starts to extract the ink from those pieces of paper. So now I'm going to have a good sample of my ink that was used to write the ransom note. Okay, so we're going to let this sit over here for just 1 minute. And now we have to set up our little piece of chromatography paper. This is what we're going to use to now write down all of our marker samples and actually use to pull that ink apart and see, okay, what colors makes up that black ink. You can already tell there's probably a good hint of blue in this one, okay? So we just draw a line along the bottom end of our piece of chromatography paper. This stuff is really porous, really absorbent, which is really good. I'm going to have a spot for the ink from my ransom note. And I'm also going to have a spot for each of my suspects' markers. So there's 3 suspects in this case. Each one was found with a black marker on them, but each one is slightly different. We have number 1, which is a watercolor marker that I found in the art classroom. Oops. I have a Mr. Sketch black marker. And I also have a Liquimark black permanent marker. So we're going to be testing those out. So we need a sample from each one. So you're just going to want to press down for a few seconds, not too long, on the line so that it all lines up and will get wicked away at the same rate. And it's really important that you write this here in pencil, because if you write it in ink, it's also going to get wicked up and those pigments are going to be taken away. And now that's really going to interfere with your chromatography. All right, so now that we have that done, you might be wondering, okay, well, how am I going to get my ink sample from my note here, right? You can't really just pour it on. And this is a process that does take a little bit of patience, okay? So you're going to use a capillary tube. It's just a small glass tube, and it actually wicks up liquid, okay, along the sides of the glass. So we are just going to put a small dot there and let it dry. Ethyl alcohol evaporates fairly quickly. And I'm just going to keep layering those dots. I'm just going to keep doing this and keep doing this for probably a good 10-15 minutes, right? It's really important that you let the alcohol dry in between each dot so that it stays as small and as concentrated as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and in a little while we will have a good sample. All right, and so after a lot of patience, you will end up with something that looks like this. You can see that the pigment is very dark and concentrated in the middle, and that's going to be a very good sample to use in our chromatography. Okay, so what you're going to be doing now is putting it in that chromatography chamber. You have a beaker, and we're going to fill the bottom, maybe centimeter of the beaker, with some ethyl alcohol, and put it in the, making sure that this portion of our note or our chromatography paper is all saturated in the ethyl alcohol. Okay. All right, so once that has taken place, you can take off tinfoil, take out your chromatography paper, and this is what you are left with. Technically, this is called a chromatograph, but you can see how, although each marker was black, it's actually made up of different pigments, right? You have one that is kind of a purpley gray, right? You have one that's mainly based in blue ink, another in pink, and now you can easily differentiate between those colors, and you can tell which one your ransom note was written with. Okay, so for your write-up for this lab, you will find this page in your booklet. Okay, you can also find this on Google Classroom, and I'm just asking you to fill in this page, draw what you have seen, okay, include, what color each one was, how high did it go up the chromatography paper, and give me your conclusion. Who do you think wrote the ransom note, and explain your reasons. You can submit it on Google Classroom. I'll have a document waiting area so you can submit it there, or you can just take a quick picture of this completed sheet of paper and send it to me through email. Thanks, everybody. Hope you're doing well.